Hi, Chris.
Hello, we're
Hi,
live.
Chris.
Hi. Awesome. We made it. Let's see. Okay, cool. It's a full house today. Awesome. Okay, 25. Hi, Natalia.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Good. How are you? Let's see what's the familiar faces here. I know a lot of you guys already.
Chris, I cannot turn on my webcam since I on in my PC. So yeah, I don't
Okay.
know my PC.
Yeah, that's okay. Let me just start by sharing my screen here before I forget, because I'm old and I forget things, you know. Let's see. Let's start like this. Well, first off, thank you so much, guys, for the support, you know, and for being here with me. And a lot of you guys are kick-ass artists, and it's always like you know, a little intimidating and humbling to get like so many like super talented artists taking, you know, a class with someone else, you know. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys have fun during this class. I'm gonna give you some heads up about the way things are gonna work. So we're gonna start with like talking about a little bit about portraits today, obviously because the class is about portraits. But everything about this class is very free. I would say that because that means like we don't have assignments, for example, right? We don't have any assignments, and a lot of my students, like in the past 2 months, they try to keep up with what I was doing, like in real time. And if you do that, you might get in trouble because it's a lot of stuff to cover. And the only reason I do at the speed I do is because I have experience doing this, because I created basically like my own pipeline, right? So it's the stuff that I'm more comfortable doing. Sometimes it might seem a little bit like old school, right? Like sometimes like, oh, but I have a solution that's a little bit faster and easier here. I use this tool to do this thing. And I was like, okay, cool. But I'm going to be exposing basically like the way I do things. So that's the name, Fly on the Wall. And so the way it normally works is like this. I keep like basically like by default, the microphones are muted at the beginning of each class. And then, of course, like you guys can unmute yourselves at any time you want. But I would say like I have like a better flow if I just like do my monologue and explain everything, so I can actually show you a lot of stuff. You know, it's like I can cover a lot of ground by just like doing my little monologue for about an hour. And then the second hour, I actually say, you know, you guys are free to ask any questions. And then from that point on, anything goes, you know. It's basically, it's going to all depend of like how this class going to flow, like different different people actually flow in a different way, right? Like, for example, if I lost my train of thought. Sorry, but let me start with show you something first, so everybody's situated and aware of what's going on. So I sent this email before to you guys, and I think you already got it. If you didn't, so this is the basically like the web page that I created, just like I released like just today, actually, like kind of like to the public. But it's kind of like something I put together for my future classes. This one is the third of 3 of the series, right? So it's the last one for this basically like summer, I would say. So I started in May as a test to see how things would go, and then the classes just keep growing, which is great. And so I put this website because it's easier to just like, you know, it's like for people to be informed of what's going on, what's the type of class this is, get some testimonials in there so people are aware of, you know, it's like what to expect basically. And I have this students area here, and I created, you know, it's like a couple of months in here, so May, June, and July. So if you click on it, the password for you guys would be like the initials of Fly on the Wall, so FOTW, right? And then 7 2019, basically it's super simple, like 7 2019, which is basically the month. And then you're gonna have access to this, and then here you're gonna have access to this Google Drive with support files. And it's optional if you want to use the stuff I put in there. Basically, like the model I put in there, it has like UVs already. It has some topology, but not perfect because it's mostly like a zero-meshed model. So it's kind of like something if you guys don't have anything to start with, you can actually start with it. But I would encourage you guys, if you have like a nicer base mesh, you can start from. I think that would be ideal. And then I have like a lighting setup. So basically like what I have here, let me see if I find it here. Let's see, Ray. So for the last month's class, I created this guy here, which is not completely finished just yet. So this was done during the class, right, for last month. And I still have to sculpt stuff, you know, it's like finish the clothing and improve the likeness, especially the hair. The groom is very simple. So this lighting setup here is basically the lighting setup I put in that folder for you guys. So it's the same one. So it has a giant like softbox. It has some, you know, it's like just like two area lights from the sides. And then you guys are free to grab it. And that's a good starting point, I guess, you know, when we start doing renders and everything. They have some reference stuff for you guys. So there is like Darren's awesome Artstation article he put up about likeness, since we're going to be talking about likeness. And again, I mean, this is going to be like a little project I have. Basically, like I'm going to do a portrait of someone. I'm going to tell you soon who that is. And then basically, like we're going to be talking about this. But that doesn't mean you cannot use any of the techniques we're going to be talking about to current projects you're working on. For example, if you want to try to improve like a monster or something you have in your mind, you know, you can use some of the techniques as well. So nothing, it's like a, you know, set in stone. I mean, like you guys feel free to use the techniques the way you think it's the best. But I'm going to be exposing you guys to a lot of information. So the first week is going to be easy. It's going to be kind of like a little slow even, because I'm going to be just building the base mesh and starting from basically from a sphere today. In the past two classes, I used the base mesh to start. But then I realized that, you know what, like you're missing this opportunity of just like starting from scratch. And then some people were asking, I was like, are you going to be talking about primary forms and things like that? They was like, yeah, but it takes some time. But you know what, at the end of the day, based on the experience for the past 2 months, the last 2 days are basically almost like I didn't have any more content to add. So basically like go more like towards like questions and answers and things like that. So I think we can use a little bit more time to just like build from scratch. So we can start from there. So this article is very cool. He talks about all kinds of stuff from lens. It was like where to find like pictures of celebrity. And this is a brilliant one, I think. Like, you know, it's like mugshots. I never thought about it. So like if you want to find like pictures of someone famous, probably this person had to run into like with the loss of some time at some point. So let me just make sure we are all, let's see. I'm going to just mute you guys for a second here. And then, but you can unmute yourself later, of course. And then from here, I mean, like we have a bunch of other links in here you can check. Like there's a gigantic, Palamita actually posted a gigantic folder full of references in here, like from eyes to skin type to like super macro photography of like teeth and all kinds of stuff. It's an amazing resource. So if you guys go to that link, I mean, you'll be able to get that. And then a bunch of books. I have those books here on the side. And I just, it's stuff I collected over the years, you know, it's like some books that can help you to get like a, you know, it's like get an idea about like the heads and variations and things like that. The most recent one I got is this one here, which is not new, but it's a great book, right? This one here from Aldis Zarins. And it's awesome because he breaks down everything about the head, right? The internal moving parts and everything else, right? So it's like it's a great anatomy book. And then, yeah, that's basically what it is. So we're gonna have access to all this stuff. And then to start the class, let's start talking about the likeness itself, right? My approach for likeness is normally something that's completely free form. And what I mean by that is that I'm not like using blueprints, for example. So, you know, it's like what we do like with our professional work is basically you just like use anything you can. Use scans, use like scan data for skin, for everything, right? And then everything is easy because everything is right there. You get the textures for free and everything. So there is not a lot of challenge, right? You're just doing like a technical work basically. So for this class, I think the intention is to kind of like try to rescue a little bit of that craftsmanship, right? Like basically like doing something by hand and valuing the art, right, of doing it. So basically like all the textures are going to be painting by hand. where you're going to be sculpting the pores, details, wrinkles, and everything by hand. Again, like I don't want to tell you guys like don't use texturing XYZ. I would say like if you want to mix, for example, those techniques with whatever you have available, totally fine with me. But myself, I'm going to be doing this because I always take as a challenge, you know, it's like to try to finish a work in about 4 weeks by doing everything manually. So it's a lot of work. And if you go that route, just be advised that, you know, it's like you're going to be tired at the end because you're going to have to spend a good chunk of time doing this. So let's talk about let's see, this one here. Let's start talking about like the camera lenses, right? I think this is the most important thing because you're going to be looking for pictures online. You know, normally like we don't have access to like a light stage, right? Like in our personal work. Light stage is basically like if you work professionally, you know, it's a dome of lights that actually captures the scan and all the textures, right? And everything's baked into that. And then you get, you know, it's like you get like a model ready to go. But if you're trying to sculpt someone who you don't have a scan, you're going to have to actually do old school way, right? Which is like trying to find references of that person online. A good resource for that, if you're sculpting celebrities, is Getty Images. So for example, if I just type like Ray Harryhausen right here, I get a lot of references of the guy, you know. I'm pretty sure you can get like any famous person in there. You're going to see like from multiple angles as well, so it can be very helpful. But the thing is, like, if you look at those pictures, there is not a lot of like pictures that are actually taken in a studio with control light. You know, it's like basically like a daylight calibrated, for example, like 7,000 to 7,500 Kelvin, right? Like a kind of like a bright white light. So you're gonna get all kinds of distortions, right? You're gonna get some stuff that's outside with natural light. Some stuff is actually on a red carpet. And then you're going to have flashlight that's going to wash out a couple of things. It's going to be deceiving for the type of, for the color of the skin, right? And so there's a lot going on here. And when it comes to the lenses, it's even more troubling, right? Because you never know what lens the person is using. Unless you find, for example, like the EXIF information in the pictures. And then in that case, you can actually see what's going on with it, right? In the case of those pictures here, I don't think you can find, let's see if this one has anything. I don't think it has any information on it. But if you go, for example, if you find someone on, let's say, like Flickr, and it was done by some, you know, amateur person or even like professional person who actually kept the EXIF and everything, you might be able to track down what's the camera, the lens that you're using, right? But in our case, we can only guess. You know, it's like if it's a picture, for example, that's non-intrusive. So, for example, like a candid picture taken from a distance or something like that. It's more likely they're using like a longer lens, right? And they're trying to, you know, capture things, let's say, like with a flatter lens, I would say. So, for example, like either they're using like maybe like a 70-200 lens or something like that to be from a distance and still capture some close-ups. But you never know exactly what's going on, right? So basically, like I think this tells the whole story here. So in this case here, if it's a portrait of just the face and shoulders, my ideal lens is between 85 and 100 for this type of portrait. I think 100 is really good right here. When it gets to 200, it gets a little too flat, so the face is going to start looking very wide, right? And then as you go smaller with your lens, it's going to start like losing a lot, right? Like for example, the ear is going to start disappearing behind the face, right? And everything is going to start getting very distorted. So the nose is going to grow a lot. So from this nose to that nose, that's a big difference, right? So there is no formula for that. I think the formula is to actually chase the form, right? That's the only way to do it. And to me, it's a fun part of the whole progress. You know, it's like when you're doing portrait, it's the chase. You know, it's like basically like to me it's this puzzle that you kind of like sometimes you can nail, for example, the front view. And then you think you have the side view kind of figured it out because you saw pictures this way or that. And then all of a sudden it wasn't quite like that. You know, it's like, and then the 3/4 doesn't work because you didn't nail the, you know, it's like the profile picture. So it's always a chase, but to me, that's the thrilling part, you know, it's like to actually find those pieces of the puzzle. So you find a new reference all of a sudden, and then you assemble a little bit of that puzzle later on, you know. So it's all about like trying to find out, for example, if you use those pictures as a reference, you can kind of realize, you know, it's like if the picture of the person you're looking for has a big nose, for example, and the ears are a little bit hidden behind the face, you can tell it's a very small number, right? Like, so the lens is a, you know, and if the face looks pretty flat with a small nose and the ears are completely visible, both of them, it's more like a 200, 300 millimeters lens, and anything in between, right? So it's kind of like over time you start learning how to see those things, and then you can get like a ballpark. So let's say like between 50 and 70 or something like that, you know, you can kind of like figure it out. But you see like how much different the same person looks by just like changing the lens, right? And the same is true for lighting as well. If you look at lighting, you know, it's like depending on the lighting, if you get like the same person with totally different types of lighting, it's going to look like a different person as well. So let's talk about I think like starting with our scenes. So this is the model I had from last month. So this is Ray in here. It's still in progress. I have to do a lot of work on the size of the face. Doesn't have any detail. But I had to abort mission this time because I was dealing with the website. So that's why I kind of like stopped a little bit working on it. But I'm going to start by actually setting up the scenes with you guys. So we're going to start with doing a little thing here. Let's open Maya, which I already have open in here, right here. And if you guys are not completely familiar with Maya, I would say go ahead and start like studying, because we're going to be using it a lot. But everything I do during this class is completely explained. I mean, like if I'm opening a file, I'm going to show you how I'm opening, what's the options I'm using to open the file. If I'm using a brush, I show you like every single setting. If I'm opening like a skin shader, I'm going to break up every single node of the skin shader just to explain what's plugged in there and why they are working a certain way. So even if you don't know Maya, basically just by following the steps in the videos, you should be able to navigate, right? So this is the interface here, and my workspace I normally uses the XGen interactive room that you can select right here. I like that one because I get like the outliner in here, and I get my XGen in here, which I'm going to be using a lot later. So I kind of got used to this interface. And the first thing we're going to have to pay attention here is how to import stuff, right, from ZBrush, so it doesn't break. The first thing you're going to notice if you go to import, so file import, and you click the option box, and then we scroll all the way down here. Actually, you pick the OBJ in here as a object, like a file type. So OBJ, if you scroll all the way down, by default, Maya, for whatever reason, has multiple objects, right? Which obviously, if you're saving like an OBJ with everything broken down, I guess it makes sense to actually bring everything separate, right? But in the case of ZBrush, if you export something with polygroups or whatever it is, if you get like multiple objects, everything's going to come like a puzzle. It's going to be like everything is going to be separate, and it's going to take longer to load and everything, and you're never going to be able to do a morph target because, you know, it's going to be completely scattered. So the first thing you do, you're going to select single object, and you're going to go to edit and then save settings. So next time is saved. And then I'm going to import, and I'm going to start with that model that I made available to you guys, which is this guy here. And it's a very simple mesh. I mean, like there's not a lot going on with it. You know, the topology, like I said, it's okay-ish. It was done in ZBrush completely with the Z-remesher, but it's a decent, okay topology to start something, you know. So if I show you the topology, looks like this, right? It's all Z-remesh, which did a decent job. But for example, in our case, we're going to be concentrating a lot around this area right here, which is the cheeks, right? And for the cheeks, you see like everything is a little bit too spread out. And at the same time, we have a ton of detail available, a ton of polygons available in the ears. So this is a waste, right? But that's how Z-remesh actually resolve the mesh. So if you want to use this mesh, you use it at your own risk, or you can actually just retopologize a little bit, maybe like redo some of that and add more topology around the cheeks. Because I think like the most visible areas for pores normally when you're sculpting, you're going to be the cheeks, definitely, the chin, and the forehead. So if you have a decent amount of topology in there, I think those areas are the ones that are going to catch the specular the most, right? So this is going to be cool if you have more topology in there. So if I click the mesh in here, I go to Window, and I go to Modeling Editors, and then UV Editor. And now I can see that I have some topology in there. And apparently this one is broken. See, I already did something wrong here. I think like the ZTL, the file I sent to you guys, not the OBJ, is the one to use. So let's do this. Let's load the ZTL first. I can just like reset this whole thing. Yeah, let's do this first. So let's do, I think base mesh. No, not this one. I think you're gonna get from inside the Ray model right here. Okay, this one is the latest I sent to you guys. So base mesh 5. Okay, so this one should have the decent topology. So everything is in there. Everything is separate by polygroup, as you can tell. So this one is available to download. Let's export this mesh. So let's see, export, and then we're going to just use that one as the one. I think the one I saved for you guys is correct. Actually, it's just that I opened the wrong one, I believe. So let's just do this OBJ, and then head 5. Okay, let's get it from this folder here. Let's try it. Let's see, Ray. Housing, and then OBJ. Let's see by date. This guy here. Let's see if this one was correct. Yeah, this one is correct. So yeah, the one I saved should be fine, but if it's not, I mean, like the ZTL is completely fine. So basically, like the way I have separated in here, it's by you know, it's by UVs, right? By UDIMs. And the way I do, I mean, like I'm not too concerned about preserving the seams in the middle completely, like, you know, attached, because HD geometry is what we're going to be using, and it doesn't create like any seams. You know, the model is going to be completely seamless, so I'm not concerned about that. So I kind of like my intention is to actually optimize as much space as I can and use this this aisles to actually you know, you like use the most of each one of those areas, right? I'm going to be talking about scale first, and then we're going to be talking about the UVs as well. You see, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 UDIMs, and then you might be asking like why you have 6 and not 5 or 4. And then let's talk about that next. So I'm going to move it away. Let's go to the front view here. And just let's measure something here. So the height of the head, it's important for us to actually do this. So you see, like the average human head is between 6 and 7 inches wide and 8 and 9 inches long, right? So this like 8 to 9 inches tall. In this case here, of course, like there's the jaw is relaxed, right? Like with a partially open mouth. So I have to give a little discounting here to actually, you know, imagine that this jaw is actually closed. So I'm just going to do like a very, you know, roughly here, just going to go to create and then measure tools. And I can go to distance tool. And then I can just click, let's say around here, which is the top of the head. And then around here, which is, let's say like the chin is around here, right? So I'm going to go a little bit higher just to compensate for that open mouth in there. So at this point here, I got like 8.5 inches tall, right? Which is ideal. So that's basically the mesh that you guys have saved. If you export straight from ZBrush, you should get something around there. If you're going to use your own base mesh, you can use this one just as a reference for size, you know. If you don't have inches in there, the way to do it, either you click this button here, right, for settings, or you can go to Window and then Settings and Preferences, and you go to Preferences. So it's the same thing. And right here, right almost like in the middle, you're going to click in Settings, and then you're going to have, you know, by default, probably going to be centimeters in here. You can switch to inches if you want to use inches, or obviously, if you want to go for centimeters, if it's easy for you as well. But since we are talking about like 8 and 9 here, so that's basically we're referring to inches. So that's basically it. So the size of the head is already correct for you guys to start. But again, you can use any mesh you want. Now about the UVs, right? Let's go back to the UVs here. So the way I calculate those things, and I think this one normally people get it, but some people are in trouble sometimes with getting what I'm doing here. So I'm going to try to go very slowly. So I have my calculator in here. And so this mesh here, let's see how many polygons we have. We have 25.669 faces. And that includes like the bottom, and then of course the pockets for the mouth and the eyes. The reason why I keep it like that is because I like it watertight. So for example, if you later on you're gonna try like to print out like in 3D or something like that, it's good that it's already sealed, right? And the other reason is that if you're doing any reprojection, for example in ZBrush, and you're trying to reproject like from one model to another, and both have like openings, sometimes like the very edge, if you don't mask it correctly, you can get those spikes shooting everywhere, and then it becomes a mess, right? So if you have something that goes in and out like that, it's easier to actually, for ZBrush, to simply go and follow those directions and be able to reproject things correctly, right? So back to our calculations here. So I have 25.669, and the reason why I have that number is this. So my base mesh in ZBrush right now, for this guy here, for Ray, right? It looks like, let's see, go back here. It looks like this. So I have only like 17,000 polys, right? So 17,000 polys. Let's get the right number. So 17,328. So 17.328, right? So if I subdivide this, I'm gonna subdivide like by 4, right? Actually, yeah, but multiply by 4. I'm gonna multiply by 4 again, and then by 4 again. So I got to this number here, which is like 3 subdivision levels, right? And that would be, for example, the subdivision level I'm gonna be using before I go HD. I'm gonna be talking about this as we enter HD, but the reason for this is like you should not go higher than 2 million polygons in my experience before you go HD. So this would be the optimal number to actually start, you know, it's like sculpting something before doing any HD geometry. And then from that point on, you're going to start subdividing HD. So it's going to be the same deal. You're going to multiply this by 4, and then by 4, and then by 4. So at the end, I ended up with like 71 million polygons for this bust, right? Not for this one, but for this guy here. So it's about 71 million polygons worth of detail for the head and bust and the shoulders. Now for this guy here, for this base mesh I have, which again, I'm gonna reinforce is not ideal because it has those problems with the topology, but it's completely usable, right? So let's say 25,669. That's the number we see right there, right? So that's the number we're gonna be multiplying by 4, by 4, and by 4. So this mesh here, instead of giving me like 1.1 million polygons before HD, it gives me 1.6, which is closer to the 2 million polygons. So that means you're gonna get more polygons if you keep subdividing it. So let's subdivide by, multiply by 4, by 4, by 4. So this mesh here, if you subdivide all the way to an ideal number for HD geometry, you're gonna get to 105 million polygons for this bust, which is a very cool number for HD geometry, right? So now we have this number here that we basically like, we know that if we subdivide this mesh, we're gonna get to that number, right? It's either this number or one subdivision level less, which is like 25.669. Actually, no, one subdivision level less, right? So let's say divided by 4, so 26 million, something like that. So so at this point here, we're gonna have to kind of like reverse engineer to discover like how many UDIMs you're gonna need, right? So let's say like a round number is like 105 million polygons, right? Which is basically what I subdivide to get that number. So let's say if we're using like 4K maps. So try to imagine like each one of those UDIMs in here is a 4K map, right? Which one of like those squares in here? One 4K map. So, you know, it's 4K, right? Right there. So we got 6 of those in here. So each 4K map is basically like it has the potential to have like 496, right? Times, oops, sorry. 496. Yeah, 496 times 496. So that's basically potentially, this UDIM in here has a potential to accommodate like 16.777 million points, right? So if you have like 16 million polygons in ZBrush, and you have this island here like completely taken, so basically like it was completely occupied, you would have a potential to have like 16 million polygons worth of detail in here in this island. But you can tell that's not 100% used, right? So I normally average, like I try to use like an average, like by eye, of course, like I don't have like the number here, but let's say like close to 50%, if more better, but close to 50%. So that means that this number here, if I'm using 50% of this isle, if I divide it by 2, right? That's basically like a worth of like 8 million polygons in each one of those, right? So 83388, that's basically what I got in here. So let's go, now that we know that this is kind of like the average number I'm getting for this. If it's a 50%, maybe it's 40, right? It's always good to leave a little room. So 8.388 times 6, which is the number of UDIMs we have in here, right? So we have 6 UDIMs. So that means I'm getting like 50 million polygons. So that's not going to cover the entire mesh that we need, right? So in this case here, when I did it, I actually tried to go for the more symmetrical stuff, kind of like do a little bit more of like a symmetrical setting here. And so I went overboard with the number of UDIMs. I think you would be able to accommodate everything in 5 UDIMs instead of 6. But basically, like what I'm doing here, if I use the 105 million polygons, so 105 million, right? Now let's do differently. Let's do differently. So you saw that I had like 4K maps I was considering, right? So let's talk about 8K maps, which is basically what I'm going to be using for exporting everything. So an 8K map is basically like 4 of those UDIMs, right? It's basically like 8K by 8K. So you're using like 4 of those UDIMs. So if you have like, let's say 16 million in each one of them, right? And you're considering 4, that's basically like 64 million polygons. If you use 100% of the UDIM, that's how many polygons you can get worth of detail, right? But in this case here, if you're using 50%, you consider like maybe 32 million polygons per UDIM. In this case here, I don't think we are using 50 though. So, but just for the easy calculation, so basically like the 32, so 32 million polygons times 6. So I'm getting 192 million polygons worth of detail if each one of those is using like 50% of the isle, right? So in this case here, I need only 105 for my model. So that means I have like a plenty to spare. I have like 80 million, almost like 80 million polygons, actually almost 90 million polygons, you know, sparing here. So that covers a lot of stuff. For example, if I'm using like 40% of the isle instead of like 50, right? So this is like, I'm pretty sure you could actually resolve those areas, especially like this stuff under here, right? So this stuff here, for example, if I go right here and I click Control, just select one of those UDIMs, UVs, then press Control and then to shell. So basically like that's the bottom part, right? We don't need a ton of detail in there. So for example, if you wanted, you could, for example, like potentially shrink this entire thing to almost nothing. For example, a very tiny thing and move it away, right? And then maybe like rescale those guys and then consider like 5 UDIMs instead of 6. So that's a good exercise you guys can try. If you had 5 UDIMs and you were working with 8K maps, which already we established that is 64 million polygons worth of detail if it's at 100%, but you're using 32 million because you're using a 50% average. So that means 32 times 5 if you reduce 1 UDIM. In this case, it goes down to 160. So you still have plenty of you know, detail in there available. So that's basically how I calculate it, you know. Sometimes I get a little closer to the number I want. So for example, in the case of this guy here, I have 5 UDIMs. And you can tell, like, you know, when you look at the images, the renders I'm doing, you get a ton of detail even at that resolution, right? Like only 5 UDIMs. It's because we're using 8K maps, right? So at 8K maps, you can get pretty close and you still see everything, right? So all that stuff is like 5 8K maps covering the head and also the shoulders, obviously. So so that's the introduction to, you know, it's like how to, you know, calculate those things if you're using your own base mesh. And so let's go back here. And let's start with ZBrush. And let's see what else we have. Oh, before you do this, let's set up our environment. So let's get this. And those classes are very organic, by the way. Sometimes I do one thing in one way, the other time I do it in another way. And sometimes I skip some steps, and sometimes I remember and I go back. The cool thing about this class is that I mentioned before, you guys are going to have access to the previous 2 classes, no additional cost. I think it's cool, you know, because you guys can see how things were done before. And if something evolves, you know, it's like, and also because the type of characters I was talking about, like old men, right? Like I was sculpting before. And then in this class, I decided to go for a woman and a younger woman, right? So that means, for example, we're not going to go for the juicy stuff, like in all the crazy detail that we have in an old dude, right? But it's not like you guys are completely bypassed that. You know, it's like you're going to have access to all the videos and you can watch me sculpting an old dude. But in this one, I think it's going to be cool to actually go for something a little bit different. So let me just go to this folder here. And my subject for this month is going to be my wife. So my whole intention about like those portraits I do is always like paying tribute to people who inspired me, you know. For example, like all those older people that I sculpt, it's not my fault that they like, sometimes I get like some hate messages, you know, it's like, why are you sculpting just white men? You know, it's like this SJW kind of thing. And I was like, it's not my fault that my heroes are a bunch of like white dudes. I mean, like I have no problem if they're like all black people. I mean, like I would be totally fine with it. But it turns out that the people, you know, it's like Ray Harryhausen. I loved his movies as a kid and I was like watching the stop motion stuff. Rick Baker with amazing effects with, you know, with Werewolf in London. And then, you know, it's like Dick Smith with amazing stuff like done for Exorcist. And, you know, it's like, so all those guys, I mean, like you don't pick based on the skin color, you know, it's just like, it's about like the character of the person. And that's all that matters to me. I don't care what color you are. I care about your character and how you inspire me, right? And in the case of for this month, I picked my wife. I mean, like she was the woman who, you know, like decided to give me 2 beautiful kids, of all of them. And then why not, right? So I'm gonna be sculpting my wife this month. I think it's gonna be a cool exercise. So I'm gonna just show you guys this. So my referencing here right now, I had to pick very quickly, and so. She is, I mean, like we are married for about 10 years now and she didn't change much actually. So it's pretty cool. So I'm gonna sculpt this lady here. And obviously people are not gonna recognize because she's not a famous person, but I hope I can do justice, you know, it's like in sculpting what I think is the most important thing, which is the character of the person, you know, it's like it's sculpting you know, the soul, trying to capture like the you know, what makes that person, right? All my portraits, you're gonna notice that I don't have like a spot-on likeness. You know, it's like you're gonna find stuff that's not quite there because I'm not using like blueprints or anything, and I'm trying to actually more than anything is to capture like the essence of the person, right? It doesn't need to be like a perfect representation of the person, as long as the person looks like she is alive or he is alive. You know, it's like a very special attention to the eyes. We're gonna be paying a lot of attention to that. You know, and then basically I'm going to be sculpting her and trying to do the best I can so I don't get a divorce at the end of this class. So that's a challenge and a half. Yeah. Wish me luck, guys. You know, it's like every single one of those classes, I just like, I try to push myself a little bit harder and do something a little bit more challenging. And it's been a while since I modeled like you know, a female. So it's going to be very cool to actually try that. So we're gonna set up our scene here. And
Chris.
Yes.
If I have question, can I turn on my mic?
If you what?
If I have a question, can I turn on my mic?
I would say like I'm gonna tell you guys it's gonna be around like 10:28. So basically like 20 minutes from now, and then we can start questions. So I can just finish. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No problem. So yeah, so I can just finish like setting you guys up and everything. So the way I structure my scenes are always like this. So I start my folder. So I have like my folder Jessica in there, her name. And then I start with the ZBrush folder, references folder, movies folder if I'm saving like some, you know, like kind of like time lapses, right? And an OBJ folder. So I don't have anything there. It's just, oh, go back. Just like, you know, there's this sketch and there I started, but I'm gonna start another one fresh. And then, so basically what I'm gonna do now, you're gonna observe this folder here. You're gonna set up our scene already in Maya. Because Maya, you need to set up the projects and everything, right? So before you start adding anything to it. So right now I don't have a project set. So if I go and I show you guys, for example, if I click this little button that shows the render preferences and settings, right? You're gonna notice here first that this is set to Ray Harryhausen images. So if I do anything here, it's gonna go straight to that because that's my old project I set. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is override that. So we're gonna start a new environment for this scene. So I'm gonna go to File, and then you're gonna go to Project Window, and then you're gonna see this thing, right? So if I click New in here, that's gonna open, and then this basically is the root of my projects. I can show you guys here. So basically, like this is the root of the projects, right? So it's personal projects is my root. So if I already have a folder called Jessica in there, I'm just gonna repeat it in here if I don't have the environment set. And if you guys don't have it, Maya is gonna create it for you. So I'm gonna just put Jessica, and then I'm gonna just click accept in here. So let's look at this side. Just gonna accept everything default, right? So accept. And then now it created for me all those folders in there. So now basically like Maya is completely set up for me to start like bringing stuff and rendering stuff, right? So we see that now we changed it here. So the path is now to personal projects, Jessica images. That's where it's gonna go. We're gonna be talking about this later for the render settings and everything. So I'm gonna skip this one so we can actually save some time and then start doing some work. And so that's the head I have. I can start something using, for example, a sphere that use that same size as a reference, or I can start with a sphere, you know, free form, and then completely, you know, it's like import that head later on and start as a reference size. So let's start with this. For example, this is the head I have. I'm gonna keep it off. Actually, let's start with another one right here. No, I have to have it because I have to compare the sizes. So let's start like this. Let's create like a sphere in here. Let's start sphere, and I'm gonna make a polymesh 3D. That's all I need. And then let's bring this one here so I can actually compare with the size of this head. So I'm gonna do a append, and I'm gonna select my polymesh 3D. So now it's here. Let's click transparent. So it's inside of the head. Just gonna grow it. Oops, not this one, this one. Where is it? Oh, it's a ghost. That's my head in there. Let's just make this one visible. And okay, so let's scale it up. And I'm gonna just put approximately here, so we have an idea about the size. So after I do the sculpting, I don't need to actually, you know, it's like rescale things. I can just like keep it like that for now. So we're just gonna keep it like that, and then now I can just actually, let's remove all this stuff. Maybe like keep the eyes. Now let's keep, you know, it's like, or I can just like move it up and let's keep it in there and just like hide everything else. So that's my initial point here. I mean, like when I start like sculpting stuff, I change like every day. You know, it's like I either do, you know, it's like I start with the cube, or I start with the sphere, or from a base mesh, right? When you're starting from a base mesh, what happens is that we have the tendency of getting a little lazy, right? So for example, if I started with this guy here, which is what I did for the past 2 models, it's easier for me, but at the same time, you're bypassing a huge opportunity of like talking about the primary stuff and how to start. Because the previous portraits I did both for Rick Baker and Dick Smith, I started with the sphere because I didn't want to have like any contamination from forms from a previous model, right? So it's like it's kind of cool to just exercise something that is not going to have any contamination. So let's start by, it's like I normally treat this very free form. I'm not like an anatomist, right? Like someone who actually understands, it's like all the names of the everything, right? I know anatomy enough for me to get around, right? But I'm not a specialist, but I know a fair amount of like the form itself, like, but not like names, too many names and things like that. I never memorize because I'm old and I cannot memorize things anymore. So we're just gonna pull this like very free form. We start with this. Just gonna get up a little bit here. And let's just get this like that. And as you can tell, I'm using my mouse here because sometimes I just switch. And just gonna start very free form. Just enough for me to get some of the form in there. And then basically like the sculpture modes is very cool these days, right? Like if you guys never used, you should, because it's pretty awesome. So to have access to it here, I just have to switch to one brush that actually supports it. So move is not one of them. For example, like a smooth brush supports it, right? So for example, if you press this one, you're gonna see that little active sculptures in there. And the cool thing about the smooth with the sculptures is that it actually works as a decimator, right? So if I switch to the base mesh here, if I use like a brush of this size here, it basically decimates this much, right? If I make it smaller, it's denser. If I make it much bigger, it does that, right? So it's pretty cool because you can actually, if you want to just like decimate in a certain way, it's like save some polygons in some area, you can actually go for a bigger one, right? So let's do that. So in clay in general, if you're like a clay sculpture, you would probably like be marking the middle area and everything, right? You would be using, let's just get the brush here. Let's see, carve. So if you have something, you would probably like mark the middle of the mesh, like to make sure that it's there. But obviously we have symmetry and we are not working with clay. So a lot of stuff we're going to be doing during this classes is going to be kind of like different from sculpting in clay, right? First, I'm not going to be respecting too much like primary forms in a way, kind of like as a step to the next, before you do, go to the next step, you're going to have to finish one step, right? Because that's the way you do it clay. Because this is so free form, and the fact that you can go back and forth in resolutions once you have this all in the base mesh, that means that you have freedom to just like go from primary form to secondary form to tertiary form, and then all the way back to primary forms again and refine them, right? But obviously, like for our sake, we're going to be doing some primary forms and secondary forms, kind of like almost like at once. So I'm going to get her facing here in front of me because I'm not going to be trying to match it just now, but at least I have a little reference like that, right? So I'm going to put it on the side in here. And let's see, she has, this is kind of like a flat lens. So her face is a little flat in here and wide, right? But I think it's a good starting point. So I'm going to just try to, I think the biggest thing about likeness is about, it's like the distances, right? The proportions are very important. That's why when people say to me, it's like, yeah, I use this scan as a starting point. Basically, like if people generate the, a photo based on a bunch of pictures, right? Like using the photo, how you call it, photo modeling kind of thing, right? There's like a bunch of like apps you find on it's like on the iPad or something like that. You can actually generate the 3D mesh by simply like taking pictures of yourself from different angles, right? And then they say something like, oh yeah, but I had to do all the cleanup, so that doesn't count. I was like, oh, that's BS, If you're using something like that, you're getting the proportions, which is the most important part anyway, right? If you're getting the proportions for free, that's basically like you missed a huge opportunity of like learning about that part, right? So what I'm going to be doing here, I mean, like there are multiple ways to do this, right? You can use like maybe like a selection here. You can use like a trim brush, things like that. But I'm doing like pretending I'm actually sculpting with clay in here because we like pretending like this is all a game. So I'm just going to be marking here around like the middle area, right? Basically like the eyes, right? So I'm going to be marking that area for eyes. And then I can actually, you know, mark a little bit like for the nose in here. I'm just going to cut it around there. The base in there. You can make it smaller if you want, you know. You know, you can just mark like certain areas like that. Doesn't need to be anything too precise, but just to start. And then from this point on, you can start like marking some landmarks, eyebrows. Let's go, you know, build some of the nose in here. Obviously, because you don't want to build everything, you know, from kind of like a clay brush, you have the option to actually just pull things out, right? So you just pull things out and bring. So I'm just gonna be bringing the cheeks a little bit here. There's I think the biggest mistake I see when it comes like to the face when people are modeling, you know, it's like for likeness, is the 3/4 view. Sometimes people get in trouble with how things work around, you know, it's like the relationship between the eyebrows in here and then the zygomatic bone, right? You get like this relationship and also like the cheeks in here, you know, in relation to the muzzle. You get like all those weird stuff. And it's because like the profile is actually not well resolved, right? If you get the profile well resolved, and there's a couple of like relationships in here that we're gonna be talking about. There is one that's, for example, like between the eye itself and the corner of the nose in here. You know, for example, you know, it's closer than people expect sometimes. Sometimes people model like with the nose all the way, you know, it's like too like forward, and then it doesn't match that area. So I'm just going to be pulling things in here. For the muzzle here, I'm going to create a little ball. So I'm going to pull this entire thing forward. I'm still under sculptures here. Just add some volume in here. I'm going to switch from this topological move to this one here, to the regular move. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy with it. And then I'm going to start, actually, let's go with clay buildup. So for the socket of the eye here, I'm going to start like just digging this area here. This is a very important area, by the way. People kind of like underestimate this area here. Because sometimes if it's not deep enough, you just don't get the feel that it's actually part of a real person. You know, it's like there's something weird about this area here. It's very important to get that depth correctly. So I'm gonna just do this. I'm gonna shave a little bit here. So the brow ridge, I'm gonna build around here. And I mean, like in males, normally you get like a very, very strong brow ridge. Let's exaggerate in here, right? And you have almost like an arch like that. And then there is a kind of like, you start seeing like a little cut in here. So for example, like from the eyebrow, you're gonna see there's a cut that goes to your to temporalis and everything, right? You're gonna get this triangle here on the side, and then everything here is gonna be a volume split in the middle because you're gonna have the muscles, right? But in the case here, I'm modeling a female, and then I'm gonna be a little bit more gentle with this area here. So I'm gonna build up a little bit, but instead of like having this very well-defined brow ridge, it's a little bit more broad and rounded, right? So it goes a little bit higher like that. And she still has some of the volume, obviously, here, but not super strong, right? So I'm gonna keep building. Let's see, like the distance between the nose here. Obviously, we can move stuff around, right? Because unlike clay, we are actually dealing with a 3D software. So basically, like at any time, you can just pull the nose completely up and get done with that. And in a lot of those steps I'm going to be talking about, you're going to see that I'm actually doing like two things at the same time. For example, sometimes instead of like just blocking the primary forms, I'm blocking primary and secondary at the same time. And like I said, it's because this is not, it's like a clay sculpture, right? You don't need to resolve it to be able to go to the next step. You can always go back. So I'm just going to be, adding some of those forms for the nose here. Always like checking the profile, right? Make sure that I have enough depth. So if I don't, I can actually get those things a little bit deeper, right? Make sure that I have enough depth for the eyes. So far, I don't have a picture of her from the side for me to see what I'm doing here. But like I said, I can actually keep resolving it as I sculpt, right? Just gonna pull this back a little bit. And then for the nose, a good thing to do is actually, let's just build up a little bit here first. So like this form here starts over the tip, right? And then it splits in the middle, and then it basically goes over right there, right? And then there's this form here that people don't pay too much attention, that this little area here is, especially if you're older, right? So for example, like you have the main volume in here, right? But then around here, you have a secondary fold, not a fold, it's a form, right? That actually builds up. And then this one is the one actually is gonna continue to create your nasal labial, right? So as, like with older guys, you're gonna see very clearly sometimes, especially with the facial expression, they're gonna start like, being very visible in there. In her case, she doesn't have a ton of that. I'm just adding in there so I can actually see what I'm talking about. And then for the base of the nose here, what I'm gonna do is just dig a little bit right here. And then what we're gonna do with the tip in here is that, for example, this area is another one that's deceiving, Instead of like creating something that's completely rounded like that, for example, make a little ball and another ball, it's always good to actually come with, for example, the age polish brush, right? And the age polish brush is really good for this type of area here because it helps you to define a little plane. Let's see. Especially around here. So I'm gonna define a little plane in there. And then start bringing it down because I want to make sure that this area, this area here has a little plane in there I can actually use as a structural part of the nose. Let's keep digging here. And again, I'm not looking at her from the profile. So all this stuff here, I'm kind of like winging right now because this part here is basically like just adding form, right? If you're a clay sculptor, at this point here, you're going to be just adding clay on top of whatever you have. If you have like a support with some aluminum foil in there, you're probably going to just be packing clay on top of that, right? Just to create some of the forms. But because we are working digitally, we can already start, as we do that, we add the clay and we actually define some forms already, right? Now for the muzzle here, it has to read as a curved surface, right? So I'm gonna make sure that when I sculpt it, that I preserve this as being like a curved surface. It has to look like it's almost like the Beetle, right? The car, it's like you have the front of the Beetle. It's just like it's a very round surface. And so let's make this a little deeper here. And then this gets quite thin. Yeah, all this stuff you're going to be resolving a little later. For now, just to have something there. Okay, so I've got my alarm on, so that means like very soon I can just ask you guys like if you have questions. Just a few more minutes so I can just resolve a few more things and then we are good to talk. So let's try adding a little couple things here. Let's start with the lips. The thing is, like, she's gonna be smiling in the portrait because you have to understand, guys. All my models, they never smiled. They were so sad for many years because they didn't have any teeth. But since I modeled some teeth recently, all my models start smiling, because they want to show off the teeth. So that's what's happening right now. Sorry, guys. All of them are so happy to be alive. Let's get this carve 3. just mark here. So in her case, she's going to be smiling. So she's going to have like a different type of curvature in there. So let's skip that for now. And I'm just going to mark some areas here. The nasolabial, let me start. So the size of the face already have a good depth in there. I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper around here. This is another one that's tricky, you know. This area here sometimes gets a little too much volume. And it's good if you can keep like simple. So keep like pretty square right now before you build any form. Keep kind of square like that. And then I'm going to start defining a little bit of the zygomatic. So I'm going to just like complete the frame of the eyes here, right? Like you have the eye socket in there. It's kind of like it's an interesting shape because it goes kind of diagonal. So for example, it goes like this, you know, the eye socket, and then around here, and then it goes up again. So it kind of is like, it's a little sad, right? Like skull is a little sad, but then later we can start like, you know, really adding the rest of the structure. And then here, I'm gonna start building a little bit of the zygomatic bone. Let's look at her. What's the distance here? So basically like the zygomatic's gonna happen kind of like a little triangle right there, right? And then from here, you're gonna go back. And then from here, gonna go up. Then you're gonna go back here. And then you're gonna define your temporalis, right? You just like to have a little idea in there. You guys are free to ask questions right now. Yeah, feel free to ask anything. Just unmute yourselves and we talk.
Hi, Chris. I have a question.
Yes.
So when you model a young person compared to the old person, so for the old person, you pretty much using a displacement map later on, right?
The displacement map or what?
For the old people,
yeah,
you use displacement map, right?
Yeah, for both of them, displacement map. Yeah.
For the young people, because their face is like really like basic, so still using displacement map.
Yes.
Or, I mean, to for people to see the detail.
Yeah, I mean, like it's important, you know. You can get away with a lot of stuff, of course. Like you could potentially use like normal maps because you're not going to have the big folds, right? Normal maps should do the trick. But I like sculpting everything and adding all the detail in there because I like to see, like, for example, when I render, the form being a physical form, you know, instead of like just being a fake thing. So, for example, if I'm looking at the details, like a zoom, a close up into the cheeks, for example, the pores and everything, I want to make sure that they are represented correctly, you know, instead of like just like a kind of like a trick. That's basically like normal maps are kind of like a trick, right? They're not changing the silhouette, right? They're just like adding the effect that there's something in there. But yeah, everything is displaced every time.
All right.
Yeah, creature or old man or women, anything goes.
Yeah, for old men, like it has big wrinkles.
Oh yeah.
It's yeah. Well, I mean, of course, we can use displacement map, but for young people, because sometimes like there is no difference when we lower the subdivision level. That's why, like, if we use displacement, then the whole thing will going to inflate.
Yeah, that's true. Well, if you use the settings correctly, there's no inflation, you know. It's like you can get like a one-to-one result from what you see in ZBrush. So as long as you did the sculpting correctly in ZBrush, you should get like a one-to-one result, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the settings I use, like I do my best to actually make sure that everything is a one-to-one translation, because I'm concerned about that too, you know. It's like I don't want to get any weird forms in the mix. So right now I kind of like established the zygomatic in there, and I'm starting to actually add some fillers. The thing that's interesting to me about faces in general is that the surface anatomy, you know, it's like it's just the most superficial stuff, which is basically like the underlying layers of fat, and like we have all those fat pads, right? They kind of like dry out over time as you get older. But you know, it's like a younger person has all those little fat pads, and it makes up all those forms you see. So, for example, like instead of paying attention to you know, it's like a muscle kind of man, right? A muscle man or muscle woman. It's just like, to me, it's much more interesting to make the forms more naturalistic. And to do that, I actually used, you know, it's like a lot of like exploration with how the forms are, they touch each other. You know, for example, if you have like some folds like here around the cheeks, and I have a compression happening around the surrounding areas, I try to introduce that by using clay buildup at all times. The clay buildup is very cool because you can, if you build it right here, right? If you start another form right close to it, it kind of builds and creates that little, you know, fold in there for you, kind of like almost like automatically. Like the regular brush, the default brush, that actually is just gonna start actually touching an area that's not supposed to, and then it becomes a little bit messy. I don't use the DAM standard. I know a lot of people use it. I know like there are ways for you to tweak it, but by default I think it uses pinch, and I don't quite like the pinch. I don't like moving anything kind of sideways in the mesh. I try to do everything kind of like based on the normal direction, right? So that's why I use like this regular kind of brush here. And I tell you guys how I have it set up. It's quite simple. For example, if I have this, where is it? I have so much in here that I forgot. Okay, so basically what I do, I start with the default brush, right? Like, which is the standard. And then I just click this alpha and I add the alpha 39. So that's the alpha I pick. And then on the alpha, I have this curve tweaked to make a point like that. So that the top part is basically the tip of the pen or the pencil, right? Or the carving tool. And then for the stroke, I actually go to lazy mouse, and by default is 0.2. I just go 10 times smaller, so 0.02. And then that's what I have saved in there. So that's basically like gives me what I want. Like it can carve very sharp lines like that, but without like pinching and without going sideways, right? So just gonna do a little bit of that line in here in you know, it's like mark a little bit. I'm trying to observe like the angle for her. When it comes to relationships, it's cool to, you know, imagine like triangles and things like that. For example, like if you're trying to measure things, right? You're gonna get like from the corner of the eye to the tip of the nose, see what kind of triangle you get in there, you know. For example, even like the nasolabial, you know, it's like how he extends to the sides and how, you know, it's like he interacts with the other line coming down, for example, right? All those lines, when you observe the portrait, you start seeing those things, you know. It's like kind of like, okay, what's the, you know, the relationships I'm seeing here? What's the distance between those areas? And then that's when you start like having fun with it, you know. So let's gonna keep moving here. You guys keep asking if you want.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Just wanted to ask you, when you start this video, when you imported the file in Maya, like you used the regular import. In my case, I use GoZ. I don't know if there is a difference in it, because I found it like simpler or easier to use GoZ.
Yeah, no, totally fine if you use it. I had some problems with GoZ in the past. I kind of like stopped using it, but totally fine, man. I think as long as if you do a test for me, for example, like if you bring your mesh and then you import with it, and then you try to do a morph target with the mesh that you brought again, and if it's working fine, I would say go for it. You know, it's like if it's not breaking it, just yeah, totally fine with me.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm just not sure if you know, it's gonna be a.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not using, so I cannot tell you exactly. But yeah, if it's working for you, totally fine.
Okay, I'll try that and see if it's doesn't do any problems.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. So let's gonna mark this, and let's add some eyes in here. So it's gonna start blocking. You can start with the little bulged area here, kind of like almost like sculpting as if the eyes were closed. And again, like if you guys watch the videos I'm gonna make available, I'm just not making available the other videos for you just now, because I want you guys to be with me during those classes. But then when it's like the third week, on the third week, I'm gonna be giving you access to everything. And then you can start like going back. For example, you can see how I started with a different way, right? Like for example, using the base mesh. which is basically straightforward, right? You already have everything blocked in there. So I'm just going to build up a little bit of this area here.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Just, going back to the photos, I was just wondering, do you have any suggestions on how to read the forms?
How
Like
to?
I can just see, like in your series of photos, there's different perspectives,
Yes.
facial expression, etc.
Yes.
I'm wondering how you unify that to actually come up with a coherent sculpture. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the thing, you know, it's like to me it's always like I said, it's a chase, right? Because I try to do my best to actually represent the forms I see. Like in her case here, you know, it's like I'm just trying to capture at this point just you know, it's like the structure of the cheeks, but like very roughly still. And you know, it's like I'm gonna be switching from this image in here to some other image, like with the profile. And I'm gonna try to, you know, it's like do a little work on that and try to see what I get. But I mean, like I don't have like I guess like experience, you know, it's like over time we start like understanding those forms, how they are in different angles. But as long as you have like the primary forms in place, for example, like I put the zygomatic here in place before I start doing those forms and adding the rest of the cheeks. So for example, like if you have a good frame, like it doesn't need to be perfect, but a good frame for the eye sockets and everything is working in there, then basically like yeah, it's just like trying to interpret the forms, right? One thing that I noticed that in the past is that for example, like in a past show that I worked professionally, I had for example like this idea that the concept was looking concave, but my supervisor could swear that it was actually convex. And it was actually, you know, it's like nobody knows what that was, because it was basically like concept artist was just like showing, and the way that he put the light in there, it could be either one or the other one. So I guess like there is this trap, you know, it's like if you look at the lighting in a certain way, it's going to look like it's going a certain way and it's going the opposite way. But I think the only way to fight that is by learning the anatomy of the face, right? Like and seeing like, okay, and I know that every time that happens, if I have a shadow like that, most likely it's because this or that is happening. So I think like it's important to actually just like get some of those books that I mentioned, you know, so I can try to get to know a little bit of the anatomy, you know, of the face. In this class here, we are not going to be talking like about the anatomy itself, because it's kind of like more advanced. But I'm going to try my best, you know, like just to exemplify, for example, like why I'm adding certain forms and things like that. But yeah, anatomy is definitely a must. Hello, yes.
To me, it almost looks like you have the base of the skull in there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the base of the skull, and I'm gonna be actually, you know, it's like just pulling a neck in here later, and actually do it now. So, for example, like I'm gonna get this area here and select it, and I can just make it a little bit bigger than that. And let's just bring this entire thing down here. Let's see, I have symmetry, yes. Just pull a neck in here, and because we are using the sculpture mode, the sculptress mode, it's gonna be easier for us to just like smooth this area, create more polygons, right? So we just like smooth it, and then it magically creates more polygons for us. Still like very, very blocky and square, so I'm gonna be just bring back a little bit, very masculine as well. As I block things and add more form, hopefully the form is going to start looking more feminine, but for now it's very masculine, still kind of like this very early stage. So I'm going to start blocking her smile here, and everything is going to be very sketchy. First I'm going to just do that.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Yes.
I want to ask you, do you prefer to sculpt her like seriously, like without an expression, and then make her smile, or what do you recommend?
No,
What
I'm
do you
actually
do often?
Yeah, I mean, like if I was doing something like professionally, if I was like at the studio or something, I would probably do just like make a little bit less dense here. I would probably do the neutral first, right? And then from that point, since it's like a production model, then I would be able to actually start adding, you know, the expression later on as a shape. But then in this case here, since I'm working with a still, I'm gonna try to go for the pose straight away. Because I'm kind of like thinking of this model as being like a clay model, you know? And then in this case, it's much less technical. It's more like you go for the pose and you try to capture it.
Okay, I got it. More artistically freedom.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like the whole thing about this class is that I got tired of following all those rules and things that we do for production, you know. And then it was like, what about like going completely free and then experimenting with the form and then adding things as you go, you know. It's like, and obviously like keeping close attention to the anatomy and things like that, but without being too, you know, it's like I'm not gonna say concerned because everything is very methodical at some point in this class when I start doing like the super detailed stuff and everything. But yeah, there's a lot of freedom, you know. I think it's a interesting way to approach. But so I'm just gonna start digging this a little bit deeper and establish a little couple of lines in here. Oops, too strong. My sculpture is starting to scream here, needing some more. Yeah, but it's all good. So let's do a little bit of move brush now, because the move brush can resolve a lot of problems. So let's bring this one back.
Hello, Chris.
Yes.
I had a couple of questions.
Yes.
The first one was if you had any like online resource for like pretty simple anatomy, just to check while you're sculpting. Nothing pretty technical like a book or something.
Well, I mean, like those. I would say. I mean, like in the past, I would look for references like that, like for tutorials, for example, and I would always land in the same spots. You know, it's like the anatomy books I used for a long time was for proportions was this artistic anatomy from Dr. Richer, and it's like mostly for bodies as well, but it has like skull and everything. It's this book here, and this is a great book to have, right? So like for proportions and things like that, I think like it talks a little bit of that about that, but it has a lot of different types of muscle structures, a little bit deeper, a little bit more superficial. Talks about the skull, you know. It's like it's a cool book, but I would say that this book here, when it comes to the anatomy itself and all the underlying surfaces, this one is the one to get. You know, it's like it's a super detailed. It has different types of faces and you know, it's like things like that. It's like really, really sweet. But yeah, man, anatomy is really a must, man. Like for bodies and faces, right? For everything, it's the basis of everything. And once you get that, like, yeah, kind of, you know, it's like if you have a good knowledge of that, to jump like to animal anatomy, for example, becomes much easier. And yeah, it's definitely a must. Let's get this.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
No problem.
I was also wondering, like, did you have I mean, not a planned schedule, but how are the classes gonna be? Because my computer is kind of old, and I think that for the for the part of like 8K
rendering
text, yeah, that's it. It's gonna be a pain in the ass. So I'm having the chance to change my computer, and I figure I could have it in a couple of weeks, but I would like to arrange it in a way that it's compatible with the classes and all.
Okay. Yeah. So the plan for this week is going to be basically like going to be working on the model itself. So it's going to be the base mesh, and then I'm going to be projecting this into a decent topology, right? Like anything I do in here are going to be transferring to a topology, so I can continue the sculpture from there. And then so maybe like we're going to be doing some renders, I would say, like in 2 days from now. So probably like around Wednesday or Thursday. So do some renders already, but it's not going to be like a heavy thing, you know. So it's just going to be like a simple render we're going to do. And I think like your computer, you might need some more memory and stuff. It's when we start doing the heavier render, and also for XGen, if we are doing like a lot of, you know, grooming. But for ZBrush, you should be fine just with a laptop, you know. ZBrush is pretty good with that.
Okay, awesome. Awesome,
Yeah.
thanks.
No problem. Just going to be adding some secondary forms in here.
Chris?
Yes.
Hey, dude. I have a question about the camera. It's mostly about the crop factor. Since I've been working more and more with the new camera, I kind of feel that the crop factor by default it never worked out for me when I was jumping to Max or Maya. I mean, how is for you when you're working with the camera? You're playing with it, or
oh,
how reliable is?
Do you mean ZBrush or in Maya?
Yeah, in ZBrush. In ZBrush.
Oh,
how
man.
reliable is the camera?
Oh man, I don't trust it at all. I don't trust it. Yeah, man, I got so many bugs. I mean, like for example, right here, right? So this one I have 85, and it seems like all the other angles are working, but that's rare for me. If I start with some meshes, sometimes, if, for example, 85 and 80 and 50 don't work, and then 35 works, and then 38 works, and sometimes it starts working at 28. So it all depends on what's the scale of the model and how you actually imported it into your scene. For example, if you start fresh or you incorporate it to another set of meshes, and you cannot trust at all, man. It's a pain. Yeah.
So I guess you end up jumping just between Maya, just double checking that everything works out, or
yes. Right. So basically, what we're going to be doing from the get-go, as soon as we have something that's blocked in here, we're going to be doing like a render already in Maya. You know, it's like going to be bringing this to Maya and then showing you guys how to assign. You know, it's like all the Arnold stuff, like the settings, HDRI, area lights, and everything. So we can actually evaluate the form from an actually perspective of a real object, right? Every time I try to do something, I try to imagine like what's the physical object, how does it look like? Because ZBrush can be very deceiving, right? So if we do that way, we can always like, you know, it's like if you're comparing and trying to nail the likeness, I would try to compare to the renders more than comparing to the ZBrush viewport, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
You start to rendering very early in your process.
Yes, very early. So the way I do it, it's like I said, like it's completely unusual, right? Like most people, they are not going to dare to do that. But I normally do it from the get-go. So as soon as I have a model that's half decent, I bring it to Maya, and I do some renders just to see if the relationships and the shadows and everything are kind of matching my references. If they are not, I'm going to start tweaking the model based on those renders. And then the same thing with the textures. As soon as we have like any texture you can apply to the model, then I'm going to be actually adding to the file and rendering from that point on. And basically, like I keep going and doing multiple iterations, right? So we're going to have a full scene with everything in it, and then we're going to be just iterating on that scene all the way to the end. Basically, that's how I work, you know. Just going to be building up a little bit more of her psychomatic here. And at this point here, I think you're going to find, let's see, let's open a profile picture because I want to make sure I get that smile from the profile. So this one is a recent one from last year. So I'm going to try to use that one. But again, like I'm not nailing the likeness at all. It looks very masculine, as you can tell. But I'm just like getting some of the relationships in place. I'm just going to get the move brush, which is the most useful brush for me, is the move brush. Just going to remove some of that form from the forehead. Just going to remove some of it. And make sure that her brows are sticking a little bit. This area here, this little fat in here, I'm gonna just bring it out slightly. And then her cheeks in here. This is an interesting area that, you know, it's like, again, like if you get old, when you get older, you start seeing more of it. But it's interesting because sometimes you just like, you see just as a single form, this entire thing here. But then it's kind of broken up in two forms, right? So we're gonna have like, especially in the case of the smile, right? You're gonna have this form here, kind of like breaking up around here. So this is gonna create a secondary kind of little fold. And you know, it's like a little bit more towards here. So like with the smile, that's basically what I'm gonna be starting to see in there. So just gonna do that, and then let's go back in here and then use a little bit more move. So her muzzle got a little bit too big, so we're gonna just like sink in a little bit, and then start pulling up and creating more of a smile. And the corner of the mouth is important. It comes like pretty much like pretty close to the nasal labial. It's gonna be kind of like a little deeper, right? Just gonna get that a little deeper. And then this little fold, I'm gonna bring it out a little bit because it has a little pillow in there. The last class, every time I was referring to this area, for some reason, I was calling it pillow. That's the scientific name. If you guys don't know, it's called pillow.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I have a question. Let's say that we are looking for an actor, and we get a bunch of reference, and he has different body fat. Do you think this will cause problems when doing the likeness? Let's say at some point he's more skinny, and at some point he's more.
Are you modeling Christian Bale? No, just kidding. Because he changed so much, right? He's the worst, man. Yeah, I tried to capture like I tried to get like as much as possible, like references from different ages, different like if it has beard or no beard. If it's bald, it's even better, right? Because you can get a good notion of the skull shape. But yeah, in terms of like being skinnier or fatter, that's a tricky one because it can really mess up a lot of stuff. But I would say like it's all part of the puzzle, you know. It's like it's to capture whatever you can find first. Like I'm doing here, for example, like I'm starting with 2 pictures only before I expand on that. So I would just say, like, for example, like just first thing you would pick like a certain age for your character. For example, if it's an actor, right? You would just like say, okay, like I like his look in this movie here. For example, Clint Eastwood, right? Let's say like, okay, in his movie here, let's see how long this movie came out. So you're gonna see, and it was, for example, like he was 45 in that certain movie, right? So you're gonna start looking for pictures of him around that same time, and then try to nail that, you know. But I would say like you just switch to someone with a very different weight type, just like as a, you know, it's like if you don't have any options, right? Because you're probably gonna have options. You're probably gonna have ways to find different references of the same age, you know. Bring this one in a little bit. Starting to get some of that. She has a smile baked in there. And I think for this smile, I can actually use this geometry here I gave to you guys, which is just like there is an arc like that, which is, let's see if I can do it. Oh, not like this. Where is it? This one? This one. So I'm just gonna turn this one on and just bring it down a little bit. Let's see how far it is from there. Not too far, so let's keep it around here so I can actually see what I'm doing. And then use my sharp brush here, carve, and just gonna carve this area. Actually, better yet, I can just like select it and just bring everything in. As you can tell, like at this point here, I'm actually just, you know, it's like sketching, and basically like it's a concept art at this point, right? And that's how I start everything. You know, it's like it's just a sketch. You look at my my Instagram. Everything starts with a little sketch. And then the next step, that sketch gets a little bit more complex. And then all of a sudden the sketch is projected to a geometry. And so I have a topology to go. And then that goes instantly almost to a render engine. So I can just get that into Maya. And then from that point, it's just like starting to refine and add more and more stuff, you know. So it's just like it's this progress it keeps going, you know, it's like, it's just, it never stops. And it's just, it's a little unusual, I guess, in relation to how other people do it. But I like doing that way, you know, it's like, it's easier for me to just see things better. So let's see, her teeth position is not gonna be much different, but what happens here with the muzzle, for example, you saw that I started sketching it pretty much like with a lot of volume in it, but because she's smiling, this entire area here is gonna reduce, right? So we're gonna have like less and less volume because there's a pressure happening between the teeth and gums and that area, right? But the teeth here is still very much forward, so I'm gonna bring it back a little bit like that. For the distance between the teeth and the face, like the surface of the face, the best thing to do is to actually look for X-rays. You know, you look like for pictures of X-ray, and you can actually find out like what's the correct distance that you can get. So after some time, you kind of like, you start like you know, it's like realizing, having a general idea about the distance. But you see, I'm not. Yeah, at some point here, if I have enough geometry, sometimes I turn off the, you know, the Sculptures Pro altogether and just keep sculpting it. And then if I need more, I just turn it on again. It's just gonna dig it a little bit deeper here. Lift up some of the smile. The corners are very important. And this is like a refinement we're gonna be doing later. But the corners are very important, and they are more complex than you think. When you get like to the actually fine tuning of it, sometimes it can make or break the smile. You know, if you get this corners here a little funky. So right now you can tell it's a little funky, but eventually you're gonna start fixing it. So far, it doesn't look anything like her. But that's what we're gonna fix. That's what we're gonna be doing. So what happens as well, I mean, like we don't have the time to do the entire thing during the class, but you see like that I'm a maniac and I keep working even before the class is over for at least like another hour, an hour and a half. And so for example, like from this point here, I'm gonna be, after the class is over with you guys, I'm gonna probably keep recording whatever I'm doing here, and then I can save a video of the time lapse so you guys don't miss anything. And that's basically, you know, the stuff I can post on Instagram as well, so people can actually see what I did. But yeah, and then basically that's what I do every night. You know, it's like I finish the class and I keep working more. If it's a day I need to do grooming, I'm gonna be doing some more grooming later. And then hopefully by the end of tonight, at least like a little bit of the likeness is gonna be there. A little bit, not much. Looks very boyish so far. Let's just bring the eyes in a little bit. It's very square too, so we're gonna have to start resolving that. Let's add some ears in here. It's almost like kind of like a little bit of a classic generic head. It's not much of a character just yet. So, oh, what happened in here? It's weird. Let's turn on Sculptures and try to resolve that. There you go. Sculptures is awesome. So for the ears, basically, they're gonna have. You know, from the profile here, there is a process here that's part of the skull. It makes there's a little bulge that happens around here. And that's basically the spot where your sternocleidomastoids is gonna start hanging from. So basically like what it is, I'm gonna just pull this neck down here. I'm gonna make this neck a little bit more feminine too, so it doesn't look too crazy. So I'm just gonna make it thinner, a little narrower. Oh, Sculptress. And we can actually pull, so for example, let's say if we have our clavicle here, So your sternocleidomastoid is going to be basically like starting from the bottom part of that process, right? And then coming all the way. But this is kind of like if you're building like a muscle kind of person, right? In her case here, everything's going to be much softer than that. But just like showing the relationship. So basically like if it's around there, then I can actually tell that the ear should be around here. So let's see, let's do a little mask. It's right behind it that happens. And then the ear is going to be roughly around like the base of the nose and then the eyebrows, right? Like kind of like a classic size ear is going to be around there. And you can see I'm doing a little bit of a diagonal here as well, right? So I'm not like doing like a straight line like that. The ear is always like to make it more natural. You create like, obviously like the human body is this thing that it has all kinds of variations as well. Sometimes you see someone who has very unusual proportions, you know, it's like it's not like an unreal person, right? It's a real person, but it has all those weird proportions. So what we do here is like everything we do first when you're sketching something, it's almost like you're still using the same Greek like ideal of beauty and proportion, right? So basically like everything we use in 2019, the Greeks created like a long time ago. And basically like the Romans rediscover everything, right? Like there's the Renaissance that happened. And then during the Renaissance, all those guys, they started studying again. Like what, you know, it's like they start doing those excavations and finding all those amazing pieces from the Greek art. And then they start figuring it out, like, you know, it's like, what's going on here? I mean, like all those pieces, they look so beautiful and perfect. What makes them perfect, right? Like start studying the proportions and everything. What's making them so perfect? And then all those things start being generated, you know, it's like in the Renaissance, and you guys like, you get the other guys, like not particularly from the Renaissance, like Albert Dürer, and all those guys doing like a lot of amazing studies about proportions and basically like transforming everything into a very methodical thing, right? Everything is very methodical from that point on. But up to that point, it was basically like, you know, it's like just this mystery, right? Like the Greeks, how did they come up with all that stuff? And we still, to this day, we use the same proportions, right? Like everything we do, when we see something like, oh, that woman looks beautiful or something like that, or that guy looks beautiful or has a, you know, it's the perfect Greek ideal of beauty, right? That's basically what people were talking about. So yeah. So now we have a little bit of ears here. Let's just carve the top of the ears so we don't have like this super thick surface in there. Just carve it here. Actually, let's just select it. Select this area and just like force it. Oops. Invert. So basically like you guys are familiar with ZBrush, but if you want, I can actually describe every step. For example, like I'm selecting that area, and then to invert the whole thing, just pressing Control and then clicking outside, and it basically reverses the mask for you. I'm just doing that, but I need to reverse it. Just smooth it out. Remove some of those polygons. So now I have like a little hamster ear in there. That's good enough. We need to go too much further than that, but we need to get this base here correct. So let's get the base a little bit closer to what we expect. So around here. So for the angle of the jaw between males and females is very different, right? Like for the male, we have like this very squarish. If I build like something like this, like it's kind of like a squarish jaw, right? But the females, I mean, like for women, we have like a softer angle. So we'd get a little bit softer than that. So the build, oops, too strong. You see, like the way I'm using the clay buildup is always like at the intensity of 2 or 3 for everything, because I like building stuff in thin layers, you know? So you can do a little bit softer. And it's also important because as you build this, you can actually figure out the distance between the ear and the jaw. And you can tell straight away if the ear is too distant from the jaw, right? And then it starts not working. Another common mistake, for example, is this distance here between the eyebrow and the ear being too long sometimes. you get, you know, it's like you start looking from the profile, and then it has this huge distance. So sometimes like people have the ears right there, right? And you look at this huge area in there to cover. So it's good to just like start, you know, bringing things a little closer. Now reduce a little bit of the volume here in the back. And then I'm gonna switch to the top. So the top, you can tell it's pretty wrong. I mean, like what happens, like you have to have like an upside down egg here, right? And it's more accentuated in men than in women. But you always have to have, you know, it's like a little bit narrower at the top. I got a little narrower in here, and then a little bit wider at the back. And the back, it's kind of like the back of the ear in here, right? So we gotta get some volume in there. Let's get the. And this is very important to start like spinning around your model when you're sculpting the form of the skull. It's hard to get it correct. It's like every time for me, it's hard to get it correct. And it's basically like you have to keep spinning, you know, it's like to see how the relationships are working. I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to remove some of the, you know, the volume here from the temporalis, right? I'm going to keep almost flat. And then when I get here to the ears, I'm going to bring everything a little bit inwards.
Chris.
Yes.
So talking about the spinning, when we, you know, like check the model from an angle.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we feel like the time consumed on the turntable, the model, instead of you know, checking the model itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's like that's the thing, you know. It's like you get too used, right? Like for example, like you get comfortable sometimes. You're just like sculpting from a certain angle, and you're like, oh, it's looking cool. And then it's almost like you're afraid to turn around, right? Because it's like, oh my God, I don't know if we're gonna work that angle. But that's the part of the process. You have to keep chasing it from all angles. And another thing that I mentioned normally in those classes is that, for example, like I work 9 hours a day at the studio, and then I come home and I have to, you know, I spend time with the wife and the kids. I help them with the bedtime sometimes. Nowadays she's doing most of the bedtime. And the mornings as well. She's being very supportive of the classes. But at the end of the night, I'm so wiped, you know, it's like, especially if like you get like bad traffic and things like that. And then, so the way for me to kind of relax and keep like working a little longer is by start like turning things upside down, for example, right? Because like your brain starts getting too comfortable when you're working with something like always looking at the same angle from the same angle. And then you start like, as you get tired, your brain starts lying to you and saying like, oh, you know, it looks really good. You know, it's like, it's great. And then in the morning when you look at your model, it looks like crap, right? It doesn't work. So I normally, I force my brain a little bit by just cheating like that. You know, it's like, oh, you know what, brain? I'm going to turn this thing upside down so I can actually feel like it's a brand new model at some point. It's very important to keep spinning around. When I mean, like you know, when you have a physical model, right, like a piece of clay, you're spinning around because you have like in a Lazy Susan, you know, it's like you're turning around, and so yeah, definitely. The thing that I want to just like reinforce here is that I keep saying like I'm not using like blueprints and things like that, right? Like that's not part of the intention of the class. But what I'm gonna say is that like it's not like completely ignore it, because what happens is that like independently of what's the media you're using, if you're working on likeness, you have to compare this to find out like if the proportions are correct at some point, right? So if you're someone is sculpting for Madame Tussauds, for example, they're gonna just have calipers, and they're gonna have the person, actually the actual actor, right there in the studio with the sculptor. And they're gonna be like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna just measure the distance between the nose and the chin, right? The base of the nose and the chin. I'm gonna measure the distance between the ears and the eye, the corner of the eye. And they're gonna be transferring all those measurements to the model. There is no like, there's virtual no way you're gonna nail anything 100% by simply doing everything by eye, right? It's a challenge. I try to push as far as I can, but sometimes if I'm like getting in trouble, for example, and the likeness is really not there for some reason, I would bring, for example, like a picture of her, for example, from the front, and I would basically like make my interface transparent like that, and just see what's behind it. So I can actually adjust the distance between the eyes, for example, bring it up a little bit, the base of the nose to the right position, the corner of the mouth to the right positions, but nothing like, okay, go like super anal about and try to fix everything like that. It's really to give me like a ballpark and then trust that I can actually fill up the gaps, you know? So basically like you put the eyes in the right spot, the base of the nose in the right spot, the mouth in the right spot. So basically like, it's almost like I'm using my caliper to measure things. And then once that's set, they basically like I put it aside, don't touch it anymore, and I keep sculpting it for a long time. Then a couple of days later, like a week later, I put like a 3/4 or something. Let's compare it. And then something is off. I do a little adjustment again, just to have the ballpark, and then keep sculpting from that point as well. So it's like it's really a help to get like the proportions in place. You know, it's not like if you're gonna go like completely purist about it, you're not gonna get like the model to look that much like the person. So from time to time, especially like if you're having trouble with something, that's what you have to do, you know. One thing that happens sometimes is that the distance of the eye is not correct, right? Some people like make too close to separate, or like sometimes it's too low and it has to come a little bit higher inside of the you know, it's like the socket in there, which should be the case here. Maybe a little bit higher would be good. And the distance between the eyes as well, right? So for example, if I just do a little drawing here. So if I have like, let's measure, let's use the measure tool, this one. Oops, this one. So if I have something like this, right, this distance right there, starting off my symmetry. So let's pretend like the corner to corner of the eye is gonna be around there, right? That means like I kind of have to transfer it here, and obviously gonna have to be the same, but also in the middle in here, I'm gonna have to have a very similar distance. It doesn't need to be exact, but it has to be very close to like 3 eyes distance, right? From corner to corner. But that's basically like we are talking about the opening of the eye, right? So it goes from the caruncula all the way to the corner of the eye in there. But when it comes to the eyeball is not that big. It's actually surprising that basically like when you add 3 eyeballs, and if you try to put like 3 eyeballs in here, they're gonna look huge. The eyeballs that are too big. Like if you match like 1, 2, 3 side by side. So normally the eyeballs themselves, you basically like you have the eyeball, and then you have the eyeball in here, and another eyeball in the middle, and then there's a gap in between them. Because that's basically like what the caruncula area is covering, you know, it's like there's a couple of things happening there. So it's not like 3 eyeballs distance at all. So like don't think like that the size of the eyeball is going to define like how distant they are. Basically like this is the opening, the size of the opening. So I mean by that is basically like if I have this area here to be like the corner of the eye, right there, and that's basically the other corner in there. So that's the distance here. It has to be 1, 2, 3, right? But the size of the eyeball itself is not at all. Size of the eyeball is going to be smaller than that, which is very kind of like almost like how come, right? Because the opening should be it's smaller than the eyeball because it's pressing against it, but it's not. It's just because it has the caruncula in there. There's other things going on with it. Actually, a nice way to see this is like this. Look. So for example, if you just do like a average size of a human eye. So basically, like you see, like it's about like the average here would be, let's say 23 millimeters, something like that, 24. So 24, right? So 24 would be the size of the eyeball, but then 12 would be the size of the iris. Like the radius of the iris is about half of the radius of the eyeball itself. So it's like 12 and 24. But now if you say, for example, like distance between pupils. So now the difference between the distance between the pupils themselves, which is kind of like right in the middle, right? It's about 58 to 68 millimeters. So like for women, 62 to 64, and men 58 to 68. So let's say like an average, like 66, something like that, right? So yeah, it's like if you put this on paper, you can tell that there's a gap. If you put like three eyeballs lined up, you're never going to get the right distance between the eyes. You're going to need a little gap in between them. So you can do like some of those calculations in there, like create an object and then start doing that. But you're going to realize that, yeah, you cannot use the eyeballs as the measure. You have to use the opening of the eye as the measure. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to see, for example, like her eyelids, they start around here. And the classical way of like sculpting eyelids and drawing eyelids is basically like you have two angles at the top and two angles at the bottom, right? So for example, the first one starts going up like that. And then it cuts around, oops, it's a bug from ZBrush when it shoots everything across. So in the other one, I'm gonna cut around here, right? So I have like this little peak in there. And the bottom eyelid normally is the opposite. So for example, like you go a little longer in here and then you bring it up right there. But in her case here, what's happening is that she's smiling, right? So she has a smile. So with the smile, what's happening is that there is a squint. So like this whole area here is gonna start to bulge because of the squint. So imagine like everything is actually in reaction, right? That's the way I normally, like every time I put like any form, especially like later on with the wrinkles and things like that, is that what's motivating that form to grow and to bulge out, right? So we have like this entire forms here from the zygomatic, you know, it's like it's like the cheeks are being pulled up and they are pressing against this area here of the eye bag, and then it's creating a bulge in there. So I'm gonna just bulge it up. And then same thing is gonna happen here. For the eyelid is pressing against this upper fold, and then you're gonna create the fold in there as well. So let's just start building her. I mean, like the way I build, you see, like I use the clay build up for most of my stuff. So normally what I do, I use like a intensity of 3 or 2, and I just do like in one direction like that, right? Goes like this, like zigzag, so like up and down. And then I go like with the like in the same direction, just to build on top of it. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes I do like in the direction of the form itself, like long brushes, and then I go back with the with the opposite. Just kind of like mix it. And then here, just gonna add a little bit more form here for the compression. So you're starting to get a little bit of the squint in there, but again, the faces is still very, very generic. And then here, this fold here is important. So let's define our eyelid. Just gonna dig a little bit deeper here. And then I'm gonna just mark it at the top. So the fold in her case is happening here, and then it's getting very, very thin around here. So I'm gonna just mark it first, so like almost like a square line instead of like everything rounded. And this is important for the entire body, okay? For the entire human body, is that one common thing is like we tend to do everything too rounded, right? So for example, in this case here, I have this area very rounded, but at some point I'm gonna start actually using some age polish to just like create some planes here and simplify the forms again for me. For example, I can show you here, side of the nose, right? With age polish, I can just like simplify that and start introducing a little bit of angles. And then obviously I can just go and smooth it out later, right? But I have to actually be able to actually establish those relationships. Especially like if you're looking from a distance and all of a sudden like your model doesn't work, right? If you're doing it in a wrong way, your model rarely is gonna work from a distance, right? Especially if you start spinning around, it's not gonna work at all. I can tell her face is still pretty flat in there. So I do this all the time, it's like I go further like that and then go back. And then, but if you have your planes in the correct spots, then all of a sudden, it's like you can go zoom out and you still see the forms in there, it's like you still recognize the person. Like in the case of this guy here, let's see if I go to this other guy here, right? So for example, like let's zoom out, see like that. It's the kind of stuff that I keep testing, it's like, is it working from a distance? And then this guy here, I remember like, oh, it doesn't go smaller than that. But when I posted it like as a thumbnail, the thumbnail actually looked like him. I was like, oh, that's cool. But I still feel like there's a lot of room for improvement of the likeness in there, no doubt about it. But you see like this entire area here, I can just simplify. See, I have a lot of wobble stuff in there, right? Like there's a lot of, you know, funky forms in there. And I can just like simplify it. Just you know, shave it a little bit with the flat plane, establish those planes again. Especially with the males, there is a plane right here, kind of like you establish that a little bit more square like that, and then it starts breaking around there. In her case, it's going to be different than that, right? Because she, like females, I mean, like women have like a little bit higher, right? It goes a little bit flatter, a little bit longer, and with man, you get this. Slope starting much sooner for the most part, but I mean there's all kinds of variations obviously. Just establishing it there, kind of like everything I'm modeling here I'm trying to describe, and almost like something that can fit in both men and women. That's why maybe she's still looking kind of like in between, not quite one or the other one. But yeah, I'm gonna be working on it. Try to get what actually establishes a lot of the feminine thing is the cheeks, right? Like the cheeks are normally like a little bit lower, and they have much more volume as well than the men. So that helps a lot as well to add some of that. And the chin in here, I didn't touch it very much, so it's still very strong and squarish. And her chin is a little bit more of like a point. It's going to come more to a point in here. And as we start doing that, it's probably going to start, you know, improving the femininity, right? So I'm gonna keep doing that. And again, like I'm gonna be recording this, not recording, right? Like the recording is gonna be just the class itself, but this one is gonna be like a time lapse. So it's gonna be like a video add-on. So you're probably gonna have a link for 2 videos tonight. One is gonna be for the class itself, and then later on another one just for the time lapse. Just like to have a little record of what I did when you guys are not watching me. So it's gonna be there. Just as a, I guess, like entertainment factor, right? Because it's going to be a little bit more of the same. And like I said, like if you guys want to know a little bit of what's going to happen in the next day, so by tomorrow we're going to be continuing on the sculpture itself. So we're going to be doing another day of sculpture. So whatever I stopped today, tomorrow we're going to continue. And then in the third day, we're probably going to start like projecting this into a base mesh that I have. So for example, like I want to use topology, obviously, of something decent. I can start from there. But before I do that, I want to make sure that the face is in okay stage, you know, it's looking okay-ish. So I'm not going to go further if I don't feel like the face looks slightly like her. Just going to introduce some lips in here. She has thick lips. Let's get this a little bit more geometry.
Excuse me, Chris.
Yes.
What are you going to be using for the projection? Is it going to be just seed brush or any scanner?
Yeah, you know what? What happens like normally, like in those classes that people mention, like what's the name of what's the name of that wrapper? Z wrapper?
Yeah, grab 3D or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So people use that one. I say like you guys are free to use it. You know, I don't have the licenses and I don't use them. So I just use like it's a combination of the project all in ZBrush and then also the project brush. So I do that. It normally like takes me about, I would say like an hour to do it. And okay. So yeah, but I mean like if you guys want to use anything else, it's totally free, guys. Yeah, anything that works for you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sure. So the base of her nose is very low in here, so I'm gonna bring it up. Just get a little bit of that cute nose in there. And the filtrum here is a little, you know, it's like she has a lot of, her upper lip is very thickish. So I'm gonna get it here. Well, I'm looking at this face for 10 years, guys. And now I have to look a little bit more. She's my honey, what can I do, right? All right, and so let's just like fill up that area a little bit, and then I normally like I add a little bit of volume with the clay buildup, something like that, and then from that point I can just come with H polish again. Oh look, the H polish actually works with sculptures mode. I don't think I ever tried it. I normally switch off, but it's good to know that actually works with it. And then this is another one that's important, you know, it's like to get this area here pretty flat and working nicely with the nasolabial fold. So I'm gonna try to flatten it a little bit, get a little deeper. And let's optimize this one, make my brush a little bigger, right? Like we spoke about, and then use the sculptures to actually decimate this. Get a little bit simpler, so it's easier for me to. And then I'm going to turn off the sculptress so I can actually sculpt with the same amount of polygons.
Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just like curious, like if the guys in the other workshop in the previous one,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
if they try to make the same model you were doing, or if they just pick like a random like
Oh
actor.
no, totally different. Yeah, there
Okay.
was one of my Brazilian friends actually. He was thinking about doing the same guy I was doing. It was Stan Winston, the first one, and then I said, man, like I don't know if you want to do that, but you know, of course, you guys are free to do anything, right? But I mean, like every single one so far that came out, I think just there's just one that repeated. It was Martin Scorsese. So like that one, someone picked in the first one, and then someone else picked in the second one. But everything else was like completely different people, which is really cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And
Sure.
like a female or like male hat is fine.
Totally
Whatever.
fine. Totally fine. Like everybody came up with a different thing. Some people sculpted women, and then some people sculpted men. I'm gonna be basically like reviewing your work like every 2 weeks. So we're gonna have not this weekend, but the next weekend we're gonna have reviews already. So it's gonna be a Saturday, and it's I normally do it 2 times during the day, so I can actually catch all of you guys because you're in different parts of the world. So I do like in the morning here and at night here, like 12 hours apart. And then anything you guys throw at me, I'm gonna be reviewing based on what you have, you know. So feel free to choose anything you want, and even if it's a creature, you know, it's like if you want me to comment on it, I'm gonna be happy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I want to make sure that you guys are, you know, it's like feeling completely free really to try things, and obviously like incorporate the techniques I'm going to be showing. Like there's a lot of stuff that's very juicy, and especially like the pores things, people get lost into that, and it's a very boring process because it's basically like repetition, but it's very important to get it right from the get-go, because I'm going to be talking about this as we go a little bit further, but the distance between the pores, if you get it too close, it doesn't look realistic. If you get too far apart, it doesn't look realistic. If you get too deep, then you're probably going to have to tweak it a bit shallower. If it's too shallow, then sometimes it doesn't work, you know. And everything is going to be related to the type of skin and the age of the person. I'm going to be talking about, you know, it's like tomorrow actually, going to talk a little bit about the skin, kind of like an introduction, and before you do any pores or anything. But you know, it's like with older guys, you're gonna see in older women, for example, like this area here that I mentioned before, the cheeks, for example, like in a younger person, you see like there's a picture here I put aside. That's let's see, this one here. So this is a female, you know, it's like it's a woman, and a young woman, but the skin, you see like the pores are quite deep, so you get like a lot of that, you know, detail in there. You have a ton of peach fuzz as well, right? And then there's a difference between the character in here of the cheeks themselves and the character around here, right? Seems like they are shallower in here, then they get a little bit deeper again in here, and probably going to be very similar around the chin. But then when you get the nose, it's a very different type of skin that you're going to see in there. And then there are areas of transition, for example, like between the eye bags and the skin of the cheeks. So you're going to go from porous to almost like no pores at all. And then there's also the types of skin, you know, it's like according to the age. In this case here, for example, let's see if we can find one. For example, this website you guys gonna look for, this is in the links in there in that website, in the links session. But for example, if you look at someone very old, like this lady, let's click on her. Let's see if we can zoom in. So this website is amazing if you don't know, because you can actually keep zooming in forever, right? And you can see everything, like very crazy stuff. So you go from having a very specific, you know, it's like very easy to see pores to something like this. That's basically like it becomes like wrinkles on top of wrinkles. And then the pores themselves, it's almost like they get a little loose and they are not as deep anymore. They kind of lift and then they start mixing together with those other structures, you know? So everything kind of like becomes more like wrinkles on top of wrinkles. But then in certain areas, like specifically here, for the most part, even like in older people, you still can see pores, you know? So those, you can see a little bit of the pores here, not that much, but you can see right here. They're very visible in here. But yeah, like when you get like to this areas here, then it becomes something a little bit more abstract, right? It's almost like you can tell that the pores are here, but they are much, much shallower. So that's, you know, it's like depending on the person, you're gonna need to do more or less of that, right? And then obviously you're gonna have this brain kind of, you know, it's like texture when you get to the super wrinkly stuff, right? So yeah, it's amazing to me. Like you start looking at people from close up, it's quite incredible. But I think we are good with the time. It's like 11:35 now. So I'm gonna let you guys go, and I'm gonna keep working on this. I'm gonna save the session. I like living dangerously, so far I didn't save it, and it's kind of stupid at the same time. So I'm gonna do it now. Let's see, Jessica. I'm gonna save it, and sketch 2. Actually, I'm gonna save with the history so I can actually play it. But I'm gonna do this next. Guys, thank you so much. I hope the first class was okay. You know, the first lesson. And it's still a little bit kind of like loose, right? Like, because like I said, it's not like a structure class. I kind of like I wing it in that I normally don't have a plan, but I try to be clear when, you know, do my examples and everything. And then I'm totally open to do like mini tutorials and stuff. Like as we go a little bit further with the classes, for example, like if there's questions about like, oh, how are you sculpting the wrinkles? Can you demonstrate again? Can you demonstrate the pores? I have like a lot of those mini tutorials that I do during those classes, especially doing the questions and answers. So feel free, you know, like if there's something still lingering from the past class, at the beginning of each one, we can actually go and recap a little bit and do a little work, you know. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you for the support again, and I see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Chris. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye.
You too. Good night. Good
Bye.
day. Good morning. Yeah, everybody.
Good morning.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys.
Bye bye.